Phil's announcement took me completely by surprise. "From now on, you'll help me take care of my mom and sister," he declared, his voice uncharacteristically cold. "If you don't like it, let's just break up." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Phil was the man I'd married 2 years ago, a caring, thoughtful partner who had always respected my wishes and talked through big decisions. But now, he was making demands without consulting me, as if I didn't have a say. I felt trapped, cornered by this new version of Phil, who seemed completely indifferent to my feelings. I had never signed up for this, not to live with his family under my roof, and certainly not to have my life turned upside down without a warning. But his words were clear. I either accept this arrangement or face a divorce. The room was tense, my mind racing with questions. Why had he changed so suddenly? And could I really live with his sister Julia, who was nothing but trouble? Julia, Phil's younger sister, was well known for her chaotic lifestyle. She often acted without thinking, making poor decisions that left a trail of consequences for others to pick up. Living with her would be unbearable, a disruption to the peace I had so carefully cultivated in my life. She was the kind of person who moved through the world with a sense of entitlement, assuming everyone else would accommodate her needs and forgive her actions. I tried to reason with Phil, pointing out that our home wasn't meant to become a refuge for everyone's problems. But he didn't want to hear it. His mind was set, and he wouldn't budge. The more I pushed back, the angrier he became, until he threatened me with divorce if I didn't agree. Divorce. A word I never thought I'd hear from him. It felt like a punch to the gut, but it also sparked something inside me, a determination I hadn't known before. If he was willing to risk everything for his sister's convenience, then maybe he had something to hide, something he didn't want me to see. My name is Mandy Reynolds, a 38-year-old working wife who's always believed in hard work and independence. I had built a life I was proud of, balancing my career with my role as a wife. For years, Phil and I had shared dreams of starting a family. I had reduced my work hours and even started fertility treatments to make that dream a reality, hoping to bring laughter and joy into our home. But lately, I felt like I was the only one truly invested in our future. Phil seemed distant, distracted by something I couldn't quite place. Our conversations about family planning always felt one-sided, with me doing the heavy lifting while he brushed off the topic, saying it would happen naturally. I'd even offered to pay for all the medical expenses when he balked at the cost. But his reluctant agreement left me feeling unsupported. I wondered if he even cared about having a family with me at all, or if he was just going through the motions to keep up appearances. On a quiet weekday afternoon, the phone rang unexpectedly. The caller ID showed an unknown number, and when I picked up, I was surprised to hear Julia's voice on the other end. Her tone was unusually cheerful, almost too upbeat. She wanted to stop by for a visit, asking if Phil was at work and if I'd be home. Before I could answer, she was already on her way over. She arrived not long after, barging in like she owned the place, her energy overwhelming. She barely acknowledged me before her eyes fell on a pound cake I had been saving for a special occasion. Without asking, she helped herself, slicing off a large piece and leaving me with a sliver. As she ate, she began to talk, spilling details about her life that left me stunned. She casually mentioned she was seeing a married man, and to my shock, revealed she was pregnant. Her words felt like a slap. Here I was, struggling to start a family, and Julia, a woman who seemed so reckless, was already expecting. It was like life was mocking me, placing her blessing in my face as if to remind me of everything I couldn't have. Days later, Phil came home unusually early, his face tense. "I heard you said some awful things to Julia," he accused, his tone sharp and defensive. I felt my stomach drop as I remembered our last conversation. Julia had twisted my words, making me out to be the villain. Phil wouldn't hear my side of the story, his mind already made up. I knew then that Julia had more control over him than I'd realized. Still, to avoid more conflict, I reluctantly apologized, swallowing my pride. But Julia's interference didn't stop there. She began texting me at all hours, demanding my attention and sending me long messages about her relationship woes. She even complained to Phil if I didn't reply fast enough. Her constant presence in my life became a heavy burden, disrupting my peace, and I started losing sleep over her endless demands. Every time I tried to explain this to Phil, he brushed it off, suggesting that I was just jealous of Julia's pregnancy. The accusation stung. Jealous? Of Julia? All I wanted was to have my own family with Phil, and now he was implying that I was the problem. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, a series of large boxes began arriving at our doorstep one afternoon. Each box was addressed to Phil, and their sheer size made me wonder what was inside. When Phil finally came home that night, I asked him about the boxes, and he revealed, without a hint of hesitation, that his mother and Julia would be moving in. "They'll be staying with us from now on," he said matter-of-factly. His words were so casual, as if he were discussing the weather and not completely rearranging my life. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Phil's attitude was indifferent, almost dismissive of my feelings. He didn't even consider how I might feel about this arrangement or how it would affect our marriage. In his mind, it was a done deal, and I had no choice in the matter. The realization hit me hard. This was no longer the partnership I had signed up for. It was clear that, to Phil, my opinions didn't matter anymore. Phil's behavior over the past few weeks had been so strange, so unlike the man I thought I knew. His secrecy, his sudden detachment, and now this insistence on bringing his family into our home. It all felt like a calculated move. I started to wonder if he was hiding something, a secret that he didn't want me to discover. Determined to find answers, I decided to go through his belongings, hoping to uncover anything that could explain his drastic change in behavior. And I found it. On his computer, I stumbled upon a series of emails that left no room for doubt. Phil had been seeing another woman, and their messages were filled with words of affection that he hadn't shared with me in a long time. The betrayal hit like a tidal wave, but I knew I couldn't confront him without solid proof. If I was going to fight this, I needed more than just my word against his. The anger and hurt boiled within me, but I remained silent, planning my next move. With the help of my mother-in-law, who had grown disillusioned with Phil's recent actions, I hired a private investigator to gather evidence. She had sensed something was off as well, and wanted to support me in whatever way she could. While Phil continued living his double life, the investigator worked tirelessly, piecing together the evidence I would need to confront him. Meanwhile, I played the role of the dutiful wife, enduring Julia and her mother as they moved in, filling our home with their presence and disrupting my peace. I pretended nothing was wrong, going about my daily routine, but inside, I was a storm of emotions: hurt, betrayal, anger, and a strange satisfaction knowing that I would soon expose Phil's lies. As the days passed, I gathered more evidence, building a case against him. And finally, I had everything I needed to confront him. One evening, as Phil sat at the dining table, I spread out the photos and documents from the investigator, each one a piece of the puzzle that exposed his betrayal. He stared at the evidence, his face pale and his usual bravado shattered. I watched as he struggled to find words, knowing he had no explanation that could excuse what he had done. When he finally spoke, his response was beyond belief. "This is just part of a man's pride," he said, dismissing the entire affair as if it were nothing more than a harmless indulgence. His words cut deep, and I felt a surge of anger like never before. This was the man I had married, the one I had trusted with my future, and he was treating our marriage like a disposable item. I knew then that there was no going back. This was the end. The decision to file for divorce was firm in my mind, and I would not let him talk his way out of it. With my decision to leave solidified, I took the necessary steps to secure my future. I filed for divorce, citing Phil's infidelity and requesting compensation for the years I had invested in our marriage. Phil fought back, of course, his pride bruised, but he had no choice but to agree when faced with the overwhelming evidence I had gathered. The proceedings were swift, and the fallout was immediate. Word of Phil's scandal spread through his workplace, and he was quickly reassigned to a lesser role, a humiliating consequence for a man who had once prided himself on his professional success. As for Julia, her affair became public knowledge, and she lost her job, her reputation tarnished. The ripple effect of their actions impacted everyone around them, exposing the selfishness and deceit they had tried so hard to hide. I felt a sense of closure, a satisfaction in knowing that they were facing the consequences of their actions. After the divorce, I felt a freedom I hadn't known in years. The weight of my failed marriage lifted, and I felt like I could finally breathe again. I returned to work full-time, throwing myself into my career and rebuilding the life I had once envisioned for myself. With each passing day, I grew stronger, rediscovering the independence I had almost lost. Eventually, I met someone new, a kind, understanding man who respected my past and valued my dreams. He was a mid-career nurse who had a gentle way of empathizing with others, someone who saw me for who I truly was, and not just as someone's ex-wife. Our relationship was steady, a comforting presence that helped me heal and move forward. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future, ready to embrace whatever life had in store. Reflecting on everything, I realized how far I had come from the woman I once was. My journey had been painful, filled with betrayal and heartbreak, but I emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to build a life on my terms. The experience taught me the importance of self-respect and the value of honesty, both with myself and with others. Though I had once longed for a family with Phil, that dream no longer defined me. I was free to pursue happiness in whatever form it took, unburdened by the past and unafraid of the future. And in my new partner, I found a love that was genuine and supportive, a foundation built on trust and mutual respect. Together, we were building a future that felt real, grounded, and filled with possibilities. My story had taken unexpected turns, but in the end, it led me to a place of peace and fulfillment, a life I could truly call my own.